You think you know someone but you don't. I thought I knew my family. But what they did to me. That was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Emily Davis sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hands. A sense of disbelief still lingered in her chest, the words of her mother ringing in her ears. You're a burden, Emily. We can't keep doing this for you. Figure it out yourself. She had never felt more alone. Her entire life, she had tried to please her family. She had worked hard, sacrificed everything to help them, but in the end, it was never enough. That one sentence, that one phone call, had shattered her entire world. They didn't know what she had. They didn't know who she really was. She had always kept it hidden, until now. But before she could act, she had to go back. Back to the moment when everything changed. Back to the time she first realized how different she was from the rest of her family. Growing up, Emily was always the odd one out. Her parents had always favored her younger brother, Luke. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While Emily was left in the shadows, struggling to gain their approval. The smallest mistake was met with harsh criticism. And the bigger successes? Those were either ignored or belittled. When Emily graduated from college, summa cum laude, she had hoped her parents would finally see her for who she was. But instead of celebrating, they congratulated Luke for his bright future at a local tech startup. They didn't even show up to her graduation. She didn't let it break her. Emily had learned to rely on herself. She worked tirelessly to build a career. She climbed the corporate ladder at a steady pace, always moving forward, despite the lack of support from her family. But it wasn't just emotional neglect. There was financial strain, too. Emily had always been the one to help. Her parents were never financially stable, constantly struggling with bills and debts. And every time, without fail, they'd come to Emily, asking for money. And she gave it. She always did. She had a good job now, and she never hesitated to send them what they needed. Whether it was a few $100s to cover an overdue bill or thousands to bail them out of another financial mess, Emily was there. But this time was different. This time, she needed their help. And they rejected her. After a particularly rough few months, Emily had been struggling to make ends meet. The company she worked for had downsized, and her promotion had been put on hold indefinitely. The stress of juggling work, bills, and her personal life had taken a toll on her health. She was exhausted, physically and mentally. That's when she reached out to her parents. She needed help with just $5,000 to cover an emergency medical expense and some overdue bills. It wasn't a lot. It was something they could easily help with. But instead, her mother's voice on the other end of the line was cold and unforgiving. Emily, you've always been the one who causes problems. We can't keep doing this. You figure it out, like always. That was it. The rejection. The humiliation. Her family's words stung more than any insult she had ever received. They had no idea what she had been hiding, no idea that all the struggles she had endured had been leading to something far greater than they could ever imagine. Emily had always kept the truth from them. The truth about her wealth, her assets. She had inherited a fortune from her grandmother, a fortune no one in her family knew about. The $2.7 million trust. It was her secret. And now, with everything she had been through, it was time for her family to find out. But first, Emily needed to gather her strength. She needed to prepare for what was coming next. She had no idea how they would react, but she knew one thing: this time, she wasn't going to back down. This time, she was going to stand tall. As she stared at her phone, Emily couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. Her family had humiliated her. They had ignored her, belittled her, and discarded her whenever it suited them. But now, they were about to learn the hard truth. She was no longer the person they thought she was. She was someone who had the power to change everything. And they were going to witness it firsthand. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The moment was coming. It was time to reveal who she truly was. And when she did, her family would never see her the same way again. It was time for the tables to turn. Time for the humiliation to end. Emily was about to get the last laugh. And it would be a laugh they would never forget. Emily sat at her kitchen table, the weight of the phone call still pressing down on her chest. The cold rejection from her family echoed in her mind, but it was no longer the same. She wasn't the weak, helpless person they thought she was anymore. She had something they didn't know about. Something that would change everything. As she stared out the window, Emily's thoughts drifted back to when her life had begun to shift. It was just a few years ago when her grandmother, Eleanor, passed away. Emily had always been close to her, even though her parents never truly understood the bond they shared. Grandma Eleanor had always treated Emily differently, like she mattered. She was the one who had encouraged Emily to keep pushing through, to believe in herself when no one else did. "You've got something special, Emily. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," Eleanor would say. Emily's heart ached as she remembered those words. But it was after Eleanor's death that things changed dramatically. Emily hadn't expected it. She hadn't known about the trust her grandmother had set up for her. It wasn't until months after her passing that Emily received a call from the family lawyer. She was in the middle of a lunch break at work when she heard the news. "Miss Davis, I'm calling to inform you of the trust your grandmother left for you. You are the sole beneficiary of a $2.7 million estate." At first, Emily thought she had misheard. It took a moment for the words to sink in. Her grandmother had left her a fortune. A fortune that could change everything. Emily knew she had to keep it a secret. She wasn't ready to tell her family, especially after everything they had put her through. They'd never respected her. They'd always favored her brother, Luke, and they'd treated Emily like she didn't matter. She had worked hard for everything she had, and now she had more than she could have ever dreamed of. But her family didn't know. They had no idea what she had. And Emily wasn't about to let them know until the time was right. She had planned on keeping it quiet, using the money to improve her life and perhaps start her own business. But that phone call changed everything. It pushed her to the edge, made her realize that her family's treatment of her wasn't something she could ignore anymore. They thought she was just a girl with no future. They thought she was someone to be ignored, belittled, and taken advantage of. Emily knew now it was time to stop playing the role they had forced her into. It was time to take control of her own life. Emily sat back, letting the realization sink in. She could feel the anger rising within her, but it was a controlled, calm kind of anger. She wasn't going to react impulsively. No, she was going to wait for the perfect moment to show them exactly who she had become. She could already picture it, her family, sitting around the table, laughing at her once again, mocking her for being the failure. And then, at that moment, she would reveal everything. She would let them know that not only had she overcome every obstacle they had thrown in her path, but she had also inherited the power to change her life. And their lives. She could feel the satisfaction building inside her at the thought of her parents' faces when they realized how wrong they had been about her. It was going to be so much sweeter than just a paycheck. It was about more than money. It was about proving to them that they were wrong. Emily smiled to herself as she got up from the table, determination in her eyes. The moment was coming. She was going to show her family exactly who she was, and they wouldn't ever forget it. She had worked so hard to get to this point. She had dealt with so much pain, so much rejection, and she had kept going. And now the tables were about to turn. Her family would finally see her for who she truly was. The woman who had the power to make their lives change in ways they couldn't even imagine. The woman who had always been underestimated, but now, with her $2.7 million fortune, would be the one in control. She wasn't just the sister they ignored, the daughter they treated as second best. She was Emily Davis, and she was about to make her family understand that no one should ever underestimate her again. Emily had always been the type of person who kept her emotions in check. She had learned long ago that crying or showing weakness never got her anywhere. But this time, as she prepared to confront her family, something was different. The anger that had been simmering inside her for years was no longer something she could control. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and now she was ready to take back everything she had been denied. It had been days since the phone call with her mother, the rejection still fresh in her mind, but now Emily knew exactly what she had to do. She had been waiting for the right moment, and that moment had arrived. She had spent years helping them, sacrificing her own happiness to make sure they had what they needed. But now, it was time for them to see that she wasn't just the girl they had overlooked. She wasn't the one they could push aside anymore. Emily had built a life for herself, one that they would never understand. It had taken years of hard work and perseverance, but she had done it. And now, she had more than just a career. She had power. She had a fortune, a legacy left to her by someone who truly believed in her. It wasn't just money, it was the chance to prove to her family that they were wrong about her. She had waited for years, silently enduring their jabs and their judgment. But now, she was going to show them that everything they had thought about her was a lie. She wasn't the failure. She wasn't the one who would always be stuck in the background. She was the one who would take control of her destiny. And when she revealed the truth, when she showed them what she really had, there was no way they could ignore her anymore. Emily took a deep breath and walked into the living room, where her parents were sitting, just like they always did. Luke, her brother, was there too, his face buried in his phone. It was the same old scene. The same people who had always made her feel like she didn't belong. But today was different. Today, she wasn't the same person who had been pushed aside all those years. Emily, we need to talk, her mother said, looking up from her phone. I hope you've figured things out. You can't keep coming to us for help every time something goes wrong. Emily stood tall, her posture straight, and her heart pounding in her chest. She had already made up her mind. This was the moment. Actually, I've figured it out, Emily said, her voice steady but firm. And I think it's time you knew the truth. Her parents exchanged a confused look, and Luke raised his eyebrows, clearly uninterested. What are you talking about? Her father asked. What do you mean, the truth? Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling in. The truth is, I'm not the person you think I am. I've been hiding something from all of you. Something that's going to change everything. She paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. Her parents were still looking at her, waiting for her to explain. But Emily wasn't going to explain just yet. She wanted them to sit with the uncertainty. She wanted them to wonder what she was about to say. What are you talking about? Her mother repeated, her tone growing more impatient. Emily smiled slightly, almost bitterly. I've been hiding a fortune. A $2.7 million fortune. And it's all mine. There was a long pause. Her parents stared at her in disbelief, and Luke's eyes widened. What? Her father finally asked. You're joking, right? How could you have $2.7 million? Emily leaned forward, her eyes cold and unwavering. You never bothered to ask, did you? You just assumed I was the one who needed help, the one who couldn't take care of herself. But the truth is, I've been taking care of everything. I've been helping you for years, paying your bills, giving you money when you needed it. And all along, I had something you didn't even know about. Her mother's face flushed with anger. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you let us in on this? Because I knew what you would do with it, Emily replied, her voice calm but firm. You would take it from me, just like you've taken everything else. You never saw me for who I really am. You only saw me as the one who would always be there to clean up your messes. Well, not anymore. The room was silent as her words hung in the air. Her parents were stunned, speechless. And Luke, who had been scrolling on his phone, looked up in shock. You really have $2.7 million, he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Emily nodded. Yes. And it's mine. All of it. Her mother opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For once, she had no response. Emily had won. The tables had turned, and her family would never see her the same way again. They had underestimated her for far too long. Now they had no choice but to acknowledge her. And when they did, they would understand that Emily Davis was no longer the person they could push around. She was the one in control. And it was only just the beginning. Emily's heart raced as she stood in front of her family, watching their reactions. Her parents were silent, their faces filled with disbelief and confusion. Luke, her brother, was staring at her, trying to process what she had just said. It felt like everything had shifted in that moment, like the weight of the world was finally on her shoulders, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt in control. Her mother was the first to break the silence. "This is some kind of joke, right?" she asked, her voice shaky but trying to hold on to some sense of authority. "Emily, you can't be serious. How could you possibly have $2.7 million and never say anything?" Emily's gaze never wavered. "You never asked," she replied calmly. "You never cared enough to ask. You just assumed I was the one who needed help, the one who would always be there when things went wrong. But I'm done with that. I've been helping you for years, and you never even noticed." Her father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "But this is ridiculous, Emily. You're just going to flaunt this in our faces. What are we supposed to do with this information? You never mentioned any of this before. Why now?" Emily could feel the anger rising in her chest, but she held it in check. She wasn't going to let them control this moment. "I didn't mention it before because I didn't want to be treated like some kind of charity case. You've always treated me like I was less than Luke. Always favored him. And I've had enough of it. You don't get to decide how I live my life anymore. I'm not your backup plan." There was a long silence as her parents tried to absorb her words. Emily's mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, she didn't have a response. It was as if everything she had ever known had been turned upside down. Luke, who had been watching with a mix of curiosity and confusion, finally spoke. "So what? You're just going to keep this to yourself? You're not going to share any of it?" The question was almost too much for Emily to bear. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't about the $2.7 million. It was about the years of neglect, the years of being treated as if she didn't matter. "I'm not going to share it with anyone who has treated me like I don't exist," Emily said firmly. "For years I've been giving, and you never once cared about what I needed. This is mine. This is the reward for all the hard work I've put into making something of myself. And now it's time for you to understand that I don't need you. I've built my own life." The words stung, but they were the truth. Emily could feel the years of hurt and frustration finally bubbling to the surface. She had always been the one to step up, to take responsibility for everything, and yet she was never acknowledged. Now, everything had changed. Her family had to see her for who she was. She wasn't the person they had always tried to make her feel like. She wasn't the one who was supposed to be invisible. She was Emily Davis, and she had something they could never take away from her. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "You can't be serious. We're your family. We've always been there for you, haven't we?" Emily shook her head. "No, you haven't. You've always been there for Luke. You've always favored him. And I've been left behind." Her father's face hardened. "This isn't how family works, Emily. You're being selfish." Emily felt a surge of defiance. "You're right. This isn't how family works. But it's how it works for me now. I'm not going to keep sacrificing my happiness for you. I'm not going to keep playing the role of the person who's always there to clean up your messes. I'm done with that. Luke, who had been quiet up until now, suddenly looked like he was about to say something. Emily's gaze locked with his, and she saw the realization in his eyes. He had always thought she was weak. He had always thought she was the one who couldn't take care of herself. But now, she was the one in control. You've always underestimated me, Luke, Emily said quietly. But I'm done being your backup. I'm not the one you can count on to fix things for you anymore. There was a tense silence as the weight of her words settled in. Emily's parents didn't know how to respond. They were still processing everything, still trying to figure out how to handle the fact that their daughter had something they never saw coming. But Emily wasn't interested in their confusion anymore. She had already made her decision. She wasn't going to let them control her anymore. She was going to live her life on her terms. And when they were ready to accept that, she would be there. But until then, she was going to let them sit with the truth. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need their validation. She had everything she needed right now. Her family had underestimated her for too long, and now it was time to show them just how wrong they were. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the silence stretched on. Her parents were still reeling from the revelation. Her mother's face had turned a deep shade of red, her jaw clenched in disbelief. Her father, ever the calm one, sat there in stunned silence, his eyes darting back and forth between Emily and her mother. Luke was the only one who seemed to be processing what was happening, but even his usual nonchalance had faded into confusion. "You're really serious, aren't you?" her mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, her expression firm. "Yes, I'm serious. I've been serious for a long time." Her mother shot her a look of disbelief. "But how? How did you keep this from us? Why didn't you tell us?" Emily let out a slow breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "You never asked. You never cared to know what I had. You always assumed I was the one who needed help, the one who was weak. But you were wrong. I've been taking care of myself, and I've been helping you, even when you never noticed. And now, I'm not going to keep pretending I'm the person you want me to be. I'm not your charity case. I'm not your backup plan." Her father shifted in his chair, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. "But Emily, this is your family we're talking about. We've always been there for you. You can't just cut us off like this." Emily's expression softened but only slightly. "You've been there for me when it suited you. But when it didn't, when I needed something, you were nowhere to be found. You didn't show up to my graduation. You didn't show up when I needed help. And now, when I finally have something for myself, you think you can just waltz in and take it." The words stung, but Emily didn't back down. She had been silent for so long, swallowing her pain and her anger, but not anymore. Not today. Her mother looked down at the floor, clearly struggling to find the right words. "We never meant to make you feel like this, Emily. We never meant to, you never meant to." Emily interrupted, her voice rising. "Well, you did. You treated me like I was invisible. You treated me like I wasn't worth your time, or your attention. And now you want me to feel sorry for you? No. I'm done." The room was thick with tension, and for a moment, no one spoke. Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her body brimming with a mixture of anger and exhilaration. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when she would finally stand up for herself, and let her family know exactly who she was. "I've worked hard to get here," Emily continued, her voice steady but powerful. "I've worked harder than you'll ever know. And I've done it without any help from you. So don't sit there and act like you have the right to take anything from me. This money, this life I've built, it's mine. And I'm not going to let anyone, not even you, take it away from me. Her father's face turned a shade paler, and Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind. He wasn't used to this version of his daughter. He wasn't used to the one who fought back, the one who demanded respect. "We didn't know," he said quietly, almost to himself. "We didn't know you felt this way." Emily shook her head. "Of course you didn't know. Because you never asked. You never cared to ask how I felt, what I needed. You just assumed I would always be there, just like I always was. But I'm done being that person. I'm done being the one who gets left behind." Her mother opened her mouth, but Emily wasn't finished. "I've given you everything I had. I've supported you financially, emotionally, in every way I could. But I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to keep sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of this family. I've learned the hard way that no one is going to take care of me but me. And now that I have something to show for it, you can't take that away from me. Not anymore." Her mother's face twisted with a mixture of anger and regret. "You're being selfish, Emily. This isn't how family works." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Maybe this is how family works for you, but it's not how it works for me. I've spent too long being the one who gives, the one who sacrifices, and now it's my turn. And if you can't accept that, then that's on you." Luke finally spoke up, his voice almost hesitant. "So what now? You just leave us out in the cold?" Emily turned to him, meeting his gaze head on. "You want to know what's next? What's next is me living my life on my own terms. You've had your chance to be a part of my life, and now it's my turn to take control. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm not asking for your help. I'm telling you that this is who I am now. And if you can't handle it, that's not my problem." There was a long silence. No one spoke. Her parents were still processing what had just happened. Emily stood tall, every inch of her body radiating strength. She had finally taken control of her own life. And now there was no going back. She wasn't the person they had tried to shape her into. She wasn't the person they had always expected her to be. She was Emily Davis, and she was ready to live for herself, not for anyone else. The truth had been laid bare. And now, it was up to her family to either accept it or walk away. The silence in the room was unbearable. Emily could feel the weight of her words settling into the air, thick and heavy, like a storm about to break. Her parents, still stunned, exchanged looks, unsure of how to respond. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of relief. She had spoken her truth, and nothing would be the same again. Her father was the first to break the silence. "We never realized," his voice trailed off, as if the realization was too much to bear. Emily could see the shift in him. The quiet, confident man she had grown up with, the one who had always dismissed her efforts, was now struggling to find the words. But Emily wasn't interested in their apologies. She had waited too long for this moment to care about their guilt. "You never realized what?" Emily asked, her tone calm but sharp. "That I'm not your second choice child. That I'm not the one who is always supposed to be there to clean up your messes. That I'm more than just the one you call when you need help." Her father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but he didn't respond. Instead, it was her mother who spoke up, her voice shaky, almost pleading. "Emily, this is a lot to process. We never meant to make you feel like this." Emily gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You didn't mean to, but you did. You treated me like I wasn't enough. You gave all your attention to Luke, and I was left to deal with everything on my own. And now, when I finally have something, you want to act like I should share it with you. That I should give up my success for your approval." Her mother's face flushed, but she remained silent. Luke, who had been unusually quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "This isn't fair, Emily. We're family. You can't just cut us off because of some money. You think this will fix everything?" Emily's eyes locked with his, and she could see the frustration in his expression, the confusion. He didn't understand. He never had. Luke, this isn't about the money. It's about respect. It's about finally standing up for myself. I'm tired of being treated like I'm invisible. I've been there for this family every single time. But I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done being the person who gets nothing in return. And if you can't understand that, then that's your problem. Luke opened his mouth, but no words came out. Emily could see the shift in him, too. It was as if the realization was finally sinking in. Emily wasn't the same person she had been. She wasn't the quiet, accommodating daughter who always put everyone else's needs before her own. She had changed. And now, it was time for her family to deal with it. You don't get to decide my life anymore, Emily continued, her voice growing steadier with each word. You don't get to decide what I do with my success, what I do with my money, what I do with my time. I'm not here to fix your problems anymore. I've spent too long doing that. I've spent too long being the one who cleans up the mess, the one who always makes sure everyone else is okay. But I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. And if that means you can't be a part of my life, then so be it. There was a long pause. Emily could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. She had finally said it. She had finally stood up for herself. And there was no turning back. Her mother, who had been silent for what felt like an eternity, spoke softly. Emily, we were wrong. We should have supported you more. But you can't just shut us out like this. We're your family. Emily didn't flinch. She had heard those words too many times before. She had heard them when she was younger, when she needed them, and they had never meant anything. She wasn't going to fall for it again. You were wrong, Emily said, her voice unwavering. And I'm not going to keep pretending everything is okay. I'm not going to pretend I'm the one who's supposed to be the family's emotional support, the one who's supposed to sacrifice everything for you. I'm done. I'm not going to keep playing this role for you. Emily stood up, her body brimming with determination. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to keep giving, keep sacrificing. She wasn't going to let her family control her anymore. They had their chance. And now it was her time to live. I've learned the hard way, Emily said, her voice softening just a little. I've learned that I can't rely on anyone else. I've learned that if I want something, I have to go out and get it. I've worked for everything I have, and I'm not going to give it up for anyone. She took a deep breath and looked at her family one last time. I don't need your approval. I don't need your validation. I have everything I need now, and it's mine. I don't need anyone else to tell me what I'm worth. She turned and walked out of the room, her heart pounding but steady. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to let them hold her back anymore. She wasn't going to let them decide her worth. It was time for Emily to take control. And this time, there was no looking back. Emily woke up the next morning with a sense of calm that surprised her. The events of yesterday, her confrontation with her family, felt like a distant memory, though she knew they were far from over. She had expected to feel more conflicted, but instead, she felt a sense of freedom. She had finally said what she needed to say. She had finally taken control of her life, and nothing was going to stand in her way now. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter as she poured herself a cup of coffee. It was a text from her mother. Emily, we need to talk. Please, just give us a chance to explain. Emily stared at the message for a moment, considering whether she should respond. She had already said everything she needed to say. What was there left to explain? She set her phone down without replying. She wasn't interested in their explanations anymore. She had spent her entire life listening to their excuses, waiting for them to change, but nothing ever did. The moment she had stepped into her own power, she realized that no one had the right to dictate her worth, least of all her family. As Emily sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, her mind wandered back to the past. She thought about all the times she had tried to gain their approval, the countless sacrifices she had made for them, the constant feeling of being overlooked. They had never seen her for who she truly was. They had never acknowledged her achievements. It was always Luke who got the praise, always Luke who got the attention. And now, as she sat there in her small but comfortable apartment, she realized that she didn't need them. She had built a life for herself, and she was proud of it. She had spent so many years living in the shadows, waiting for validation from others, but not anymore. She didn't need anyone's permission to live her life the way she wanted to. A knock on the door startled her, pulling her from her thoughts. She stood up, walking to the door, and opened it to find her brother Luke standing on the other side. His face was serious, and there was an uneasy tension in his posture. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Emily took a deep breath, looking at him for a moment. She had never expected him to come to her, not after everything that had happened. But there he was, standing in front of her, looking for answers. "What do you want, Luke?" Emily asked, her tone calm but firm. Luke shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. "I know things have been messed up between us. And I get it, I do. But you have to understand, I never meant to make you feel like you were second to me. I know you think that's what happened, but I didn't mean for it to be like that." Emily regarded him silently for a moment. She had always tried to understand Luke, to give him the benefit of the doubt. But today, she wasn't in the mood to offer him excuses. She had spent years accepting his apologies, but those days were over. "You don't get it, do you?" Emily said softly. "You've always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And I was the one who was supposed to just pick up the pieces when things went wrong. But I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not your backup." Luke's face fell, and he took a step forward. "I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the one who just took everything and never gave anything back. I'm sorry, Emily. I really am. But I don't know how to fix it." Emily shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "You can't fix it. You can't fix the years of neglect, the years of me being treated like I wasn't good enough. That's not something you can just apologize for and make go away. It's too late for that." There was a long silence as Luke processed her words. Emily could see the regret in his eyes, but she couldn't bring herself to feel sorry for him. She had waited long enough for him to see her, to understand her, but that had never happened. Now she was done waiting. She was done making excuses for them. "I don't want your apology, Luke," Emily continued, her voice steady. "What I want is for you to understand that I'm done being the person who always takes the back seat. I'm not the one who has to prove myself to anyone anymore. Not to you, not to Mom and Dad. I'm done. I've found my own way, and I don't need your approval to do it." Luke stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You're really done with us?" he asked quietly. "Just like that?" Emily felt a pang in her chest, but she quickly pushed it aside. "I'm not done with you, Luke. But I'm done with trying to fit into a mold that you and Mom and Dad made for me. I'm done pretending to be the person I'm not just so I can get some kind of validation from you. I've spent so many years being who you wanted me to be, and now it's time for me to be who I really am." Luke didn't say anything else. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, clearly trying to process everything she had just said. Emily watched him for a moment longer before turning and walking away, heading back into her living room. She had said what she needed to say. She had finally stood up for herself. And now, it was time for her to move forward. As she sat back down at her table, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about finally taking control of her life. And for the first time in years, she felt free. Days passed and Emily could feel the weight of her decision settling deeper into her bones. She had not expected her family's reaction to be easy, but she hadn't expected it to be so complicated either. Her mother had tried calling her every day since their conversation, leaving messages full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Luke had sent texts, too, each one more remorseful than the last. But Emily couldn't bring herself to respond. She had said everything she needed to say. She had done what she had promised herself she would do, stand up for herself, for her worth. Now it was time to move on, to build the future she had always dreamed of. It was late one evening when Emily finally decided to check her email. It was something she had put off for days, not feeling like dealing with the flood of messages that were likely waiting for her. But something in her gut told her to open it. As soon as she did, her heart skipped a beat. It was an email from the lawyer handling her grandmother's estate. There was an attachment. Emily clicked on it, and her eyes scanned the words quickly. It was a legal document, confirming that the trust left to her by her grandmother was now fully in her hands. But there was more. The email included a clause that Emily hadn't been aware of. Her grandmother had left instructions for her to take over a portion of the family's business ventures. Her grandmother's words were clear: Emily has always shown the strength and capability to lead. It's time she steps into the role she was always meant to take. Emily sat back, letting the words sink in. This was it. This was the moment her life had been leading up to. Her grandmother had seen something in her that no one else had. She had recognized Emily's potential long before Emily had recognized it herself. The thought of stepping into the role of leadership felt overwhelming, but at the same time, it was empowering. For the first time in years, Emily saw the full picture of what her life could become. She could take control of the family business, create something new, and finally build the future she had been denied for so long. Emily sat there for a moment, staring at the email, processing the weight of her next steps. This was no longer just about the money. This was about her legacy. This was about showing her family that she could not only stand up for herself but also lead with grace and strength. She had been underestimated, discarded, and treated like she didn't matter. But now, it was time to show them all. Emily smiled, a slow, knowing smile, as she picked up her phone and dialed the number of the lawyer. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and calm. The lawyer on the other end of the line responded with a hint of surprise, but also a sense of respect. "We've been waiting for your confirmation. It's time for you to take the reins, Emily. The business is yours now. Let's get started." The words felt like a declaration of independence. Emily's heart raced, but in a way that felt empowering. She had worked hard for this moment, and now it was hers. Her family didn't get to define her anymore. She didn't need their approval, their permission. She was taking control. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Emily dove headfirst into the business world, learning everything she could about the ventures her grandmother had started. She worked with the team her grandmother had built, each step a testament to her strength and determination. There were moments of doubt, moments where Emily wondered if she was doing the right thing, but each time, she reminded herself that she had earned this. She had worked for everything she had. She was not the person she once was. She was Emily Davis, and this was just the beginning. As the months passed, Emily's influence grew. The business thrived under her leadership. Her parents, still reeling from the fallout of their previous conversations with her, began to realize that they had made a mistake in underestimating her. They sent messages and even tried to reach out in person, but Emily kept her distance. She had nothing left to prove to them. Luke had stopped sending texts, though Emily knew he was still processing everything. She had expected him to come around, but it wasn't her priority. She had her own path to walk now. Her focus was on the future. Emily had built something from nothing. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that she was capable of far more than anyone had ever given her credit for. And the most beautiful part of it all. She had done it on her own terms. She wasn't the daughter who was always second place. She wasn't the one who was always overlooked. She was the one who had built her life, her success, her legacy. And that was something her family would never take from her. Emily looked out of her office window one evening, watching the sun set behind the city skyline. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder of how far she had come. She had her own life now, her own future. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt at peace. She had taken control, and she was never going to let anyone take that away from her. Emily sat at her desk, staring at the documents in front of her. She had been going through the business reports for hours, making decisions, and pushing forward with the changes her grandmother had wanted to see. The business was thriving under her leadership, and for the first time, she could see her hard work paying off in ways that were beyond her expectations. The money was important, but it was more than that. It was the sense of pride, the satisfaction of knowing that she had taken control of her own life. She wasn't just running a company, she was building a legacy. Emily thought about the conversation with her mother a few weeks ago. It had been an unexpected call. Her mother had finally come around, realizing that Emily wasn't the same person she had been before. "I never realized how much you had grown," her mother had said, her voice soft. "I always thought you needed us, but I see now that you've built something on your own. I'm proud of you, Emily." The words had been a long time coming, but Emily had not been quick to forgive. She had built a life without their support, and that was something that they could never take away from her. Still, hearing her mother's acknowledgement had been a small victory. She hadn't expected it, but it felt good to know that, in some way, her family could finally see her for who she was, someone capable of standing on her own, someone capable of succeeding. That night, as Emily walked home from work, she couldn't help but think about all the times she had doubted herself, all the times she had wondered if she was enough. For years, she had believed the narrative her family had pushed on her, that she was the one who wasn't good enough, the one who couldn't handle the pressure. But now, she had proven them wrong. She had built something solid from nothing, and nothing would ever take that away from her. As she reached her apartment building, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Luke. It had been months since they had last spoken, and the silence between them had been heavy. She hesitated for a moment before opening the message. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened between us. I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I never understood what you were going through. I've always taken you for granted, and I regret that. I just want you to know that I see you now. I'm proud of you." Emily read the message several times, trying to process it. She didn't know how she felt about it. She hadn't expected an apology from Luke, not after everything that had happened. But as she read his words, something inside her softened. She had spent so much time building walls between herself and her family that she had forgotten what it felt like to let people in. For so long, she had thought that she didn't need them. She had been wrong. She didn't need them to validate her anymore, but she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could let them back into her life, in their own way, without letting them take control again. Emily sat down on her couch, staring at the phone. She thought about the years of tension, of feeling like she wasn't enough, and the emotional toll it had taken on her. But she also thought about how far she had come, about how she had built herself from the ground up, and how proud she was of who she had become. She had nothing left to prove to anyone. She had done it all on her own, and that was enough. After a long pause, Emily typed out a response. "Thank you, Luke. It means a lot to hear that from you. But I've done this for myself. I've built my life and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. I'm not angry anymore. I just need to move forward. But I hope we can find a way to move on, too." She sent the message, put the phone down, and leaned back against the couch. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She had made her peace with the past, and now she was ready to move forward. She wasn't the person she had been before. She was stronger, more confident, and more certain of who she was. And for the first time in her life, Emily truly believed that she deserved everything she had worked for. She smiled to herself as she looked out the window at the city lights. It had been a long journey, but Emily knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. Emily sat at her desk late into the evening, the glow from her computer screen the only light in the room. The city outside was quiet, but inside her apartment, the buzz of activity was constant. She had spent the last several months building the foundation of something new, something that was finally hers. Her grandmother's estate, the trust, the business, all of it had changed her life in ways she had never imagined. She had moved from merely surviving to thriving. It was something she never thought possible, not after all the years of neglect, all the years of trying to prove herself to her family. But now, she had created her own path, and it felt right. The phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up, glancing at the message. It was from Luke. His message had become a rarity over the past few months. After their last conversation, she had kept her distance. She had nothing left to prove, but she couldn't ignore the fact that the bridge between them hadn't been fully mended. "Emily, I've been thinking about you a lot. I know we've had our issues, but I want to make it right. I know I can't change the past, but I want to do better. I hope we can talk soon." Emily sat still for a moment, the message sinking in. She hadn't expected this kind of outreach from him. It was different than the others, more genuine, more heartfelt. She remembered the young men who had always lived in the shadow of their parents' favoritism, the one who had never really understood her struggles. She had no idea if he had changed, but the message made her pause. She thought back to when she was younger, how she had always tried to keep the peace, always tried to make him proud, even though it felt like she was invisible in the family. It wasn't just the business or the inheritance, it was about the emotional neglect, the constant feeling that she was never enough. But now, she wasn't that same person. She wasn't the one who kept trying to fit into a mold that wasn't hers. She had learned to embrace her own identity, to take ownership of who she was. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let Luke into her life, but on her terms. She took a deep breath, put her phone down, and thought about how far she had come. She had everything she needed: her career, her freedom, and a sense of peace she had never experienced before. But family was still complicated. After a few moments of deliberation, Emily picked up her phone again and typed a response. "Luke, I appreciate your message. It's been a long road, and I'm still figuring out how to move forward. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, but I'm open to having a conversation. We'll see where it goes." She hit send and placed the phone down, wondering if this was the right step to take. Her past with Luke had been fraught with misunderstandings and resentment, but that didn't mean she couldn't try to find a new way forward. It wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about acknowledging it and deciding what to do with it now. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of business meetings, new ventures, and the constant drive to push forward. Emily's life had become a balancing act between her professional growth and the quieter, more personal side of her world. As much as she was focused on her business, she couldn't help but wonder where her relationship with her family stood. There were times when she found herself thinking about her parents, about the years they had spent treating her as second best, and whether there was still room for reconciliation. But then she would remember the truth: they hadn't been there for her when she needed them most. She had built her success without them. Still, the thought lingered. One afternoon, as Emily was leaving the office, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her mother. "I know we haven't spoken much, but I need you to know something. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I was wrong. You've done more than I ever gave you credit for. And I want to try and do better. I hope we can find a way to move forward." Emily's fingers hovered over the screen. The words were the same ones her mother had said before: apologies, regret. It wasn't the first time. But this time felt different. There was something in her mother's message that seemed more genuine. Emily wasn't sure if she could just forgive and forget. She had done so much on her own, and now, with the life she had built, it was hard to let go of the years of pain. But she couldn't keep living with the weight of the past forever. She thought about it for a while before responding. I hear you, Mom. And I'm glad to know you see things differently now. But I've come a long way, and I'm not going back. I'm building my life, and I'll always be open to a relationship with you, but it has to be on my terms. She sent the message, setting the phone down. It was a relief to finally put her feelings out there, to acknowledge the complexity of her relationship with her mother. She wasn't going to let anyone define her anymore. She had worked too hard to get where she was. It was her time to live freely. In the days that followed, Emily continued to focus on her business. She had already proven her worth to herself and to the world. As for her family, she had done what she could. She had opened the door for reconciliation, but it was up to them to step through it. She wasn't going to chase after them anymore. She was going to live her life on her own terms, and that was enough for her. It had been several weeks since Emily had responded to her family, and in that time, her life had continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Her business had reached new heights, and her personal life, while still quiet, felt balanced. For the first time in years, the weight that had once burdened her shoulders seemed lighter, even if the road to get here had been long and difficult. She had created a life she was proud of, one that didn't depend on her family's approval, but there was still a lingering part of her that wondered if she had made the right decision. Was there a way to repair her relationship with her family, or had she truly reached the point of no return? Emily had never been one to dwell on the past. She was too focused on the future, but the occasional thought about her family crept in. The idea of a reunion, of some kind of understanding, lingered in the back of her mind. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about closure. After everything that had happened, she still couldn't help but wish for a resolution. One evening, while working late in her office, Emily received another message from Luke. It had been a few months since their last communication, and she wasn't sure how she felt about opening it. But something inside told her to read it. His message was short but to the point. Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I know we haven't seen eye to eye in the past, but I want you to know I'm here if you ever want to talk. I'm proud of you. You've come so far. I can't change the past, but I want to try and be part of your future, if you'll let me. The words hit her harder than she expected. There was sincerity in his message, something she hadn't felt from him before. She thought about the distance between them, the emotional wall she had built, the years of frustration. Luke had never understood her struggles, never truly saw her as an equal, but he was acknowledging something now. He was trying to meet her halfway, to bridge the gap that had been created over the years. Emily sat back in her chair, the message still on her screen. She could feel the weight of the decision before her. She had done so much to distance herself from her family, not just to protect herself but to prove that she could do it on her own. But she wasn't just proving a point anymore. She was living a life she had built from the ground up, and that life didn't need to be defined by her past. She had already made peace with the fact that she didn't need her family to be successful. She had come to terms with the idea that their approval, or lack thereof, no longer held the power to shape her identity. But still, the message from Luke stirred something inside her. It wasn't about needing him. It was about deciding whether or not she could accept the possibility of a new dynamic with him. She didn't want to let her resentment cloud the potential for something better, something that could come from both of them acknowledging their flaws and trying to move forward. After a few moments of quiet reflection, Emily typed a reply. Luke, thank you for your message. I've thought a lot about what we've been through, and I'm glad to know you've been reflecting as well. I can't change the past, and I don't want to pretend that everything is fine. But I think we can start somewhere. I'm open to talking, if you're still willing. She hesitated before pressing send, feeling a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The message was a step toward something new, but it was also a reminder of everything she had been through. She wasn't asking for their approval, but she was willing to explore the possibility of moving forward, of finding some peace with the people who had once been her world. The next few days were filled with anticipation. Emily didn't know what kind of conversation she would have with Luke, but she knew it would be different. This wasn't about the old dynamics, the patterns they had fallen into. This was about two people who had grown in different ways, but who were still connected by shared history. It was a delicate thing, and Emily knew she had to approach it carefully. When Luke finally called, Emily answered with a sense of calm. She had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let the past dictate how she moved forward. The conversation started slowly, the usual awkwardness of reconnecting lingering in the air. But as they talked, something shifted. Luke wasn't defensive. He wasn't trying to excuse the past. He was listening. And Emily, for the first time, felt like she was being heard. They talked about the things that had separated them, the misunderstandings, the years of silence. And as the conversation progressed, Emily realized something important. She wasn't looking for an apology. She wasn't looking for him to make up for the past. What she wanted was simple, to move on, to create something new. They both had a lot of work to do to rebuild trust, but this conversation felt like a starting point. By the end of the call, there was a sense of relief on both sides. Emily wasn't sure where this new chapter with her family would lead, but for the first time in years, she felt like the door had been opened to something better. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about acceptance. Emily had built her life on her own terms, and she didn't need anyone's approval to validate that. But she also realized that sometimes, even when you've come so far on your own, there's still room for others to be part of your journey. And with that, Emily finally felt like she was ready to move forward, not just in her career, but in her personal life as well. It was a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, she was ready to embrace it. The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet sense of change. Emily's life had become a careful balance between running her business and navigating her newfound relationship with her family. She wasn't in a hurry to rebuild everything overnight, but there was a sense of progress, of small steps towards something that felt more authentic, something more her own. Her connection with Luke, while still fragile, was moving in the right direction. They had agreed to meet in person, after months of only texting and calling. Emily wasn't sure how this would go. They hadn't seen each other face to face since that difficult moment when everything had fallen apart. But she had made peace with the idea that this wasn't about erasing the past. It was about taking the lessons from it and moving forward. The day of their meeting, Emily chose a quiet cafe downtown. She arrived early, as always, and sat by the window, watching the world go by. She took a deep breath and let herself settle into the moment. The past no longer felt like a weight she had to carry, it was just a part of who she was. Luke showed up a little late, looking just as nervous as she felt. When their eyes met across the room, he gave a small, unsure smile. "Hey," he said softly as he sat down across from her. "Hey," Emily replied, giving him a small nod. The awkwardness between them was palpable, but it was different this time. There was no anger, no resentment, just the discomfort of two people trying to find their footing again. They ordered coffee and sat in silence for a few moments before Emily spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About how you want to make things right." Luke nodded, his eyes focused on his coffee cup. "Yeah. I've had a lot of time to think about it. I know I can't undo everything that happened, but I want you to know that I'm really sorry for how things went down. For not seeing you, for not supporting you the way I should have." Emily listened, taking in his words. It wasn't the first time he had apologized, but there was something different about this. This time, it felt like he was actually acknowledging her pain, her struggle. She had heard his apologies before, but never with this level of sincerity. "I know," Emily said quietly. "And I've done a lot of thinking, too. About us. About what we were, and what we can be." There was a pause. Luke looked at her, waiting for her to continue. I've built this life, Luke, Emily said softly, her gaze steady. And I'm proud of it. But I'm not the same person I was when we were younger. I'm not the person who's constantly trying to earn your approval, or anyone's approval, for that matter. I've learned to stand on my own, and I've learned that I'm enough, with or without your validation. Luke nodded, his expression softening. I get that now. I really do. And I want you to know that I respect you. I always have, but I didn't always show it. I've seen how much you've accomplished, and I'm proud of you, Emily. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. Emily felt something shift in the air between them. It wasn't the full reconciliation she might have once hoped for, but it was something. It was a step forward, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like they could maybe start over. Not to erase the past, but to build something new. I think we can figure this out, Emily said, her voice firm but gentle. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. But I'm open to it. To us, having a relationship, even if it's different than before. Luke smiled, a small, genuine smile that made Emily feel a little lighter. I can live with that, he said. They sat for a while longer, talking about the things that had happened over the years, about the changes in their lives, about their childhood memories and their shared history. It wasn't easy, but it felt real. Emily knew this wasn't the end of the journey with her family, it was just another step. She wasn't expecting everything to fall into place immediately, but that was okay. What mattered was that she had taken control of her own life, and she was no longer waiting for someone else's approval. She had created something on her own, and she was finally at peace with who she had become. Later that night, after their meeting, Emily walked home through the quiet streets. The lights of the city shone brightly, but there was a calm in the air, a sense of balance she hadn't known in a long time. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, living her life, building her future, and ready to take on whatever came next. The door had been opened with Luke, but she knew she wouldn't allow her past to define her anymore. It was her time, and she had made sure of that. As weeks turned into months, Emily felt more at peace with her choices. Her business continued to thrive, and her relationship with Luke, though still fragile, had taken a new turn. She wasn't waiting for her family's approval anymore. She had found strength within herself, a strength that came from years of perseverance, hard work, and the courage to stand up for her worth. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about living life on her own terms, unapologetically. Luke and Emily met a few more times after their conversation at the cafe. Each meeting felt more natural than the last. They weren't pretending to be what they once were, but they were learning to accept each other as they were now. There was a kind of quiet respect between them, a mutual understanding that things couldn't go back to the way they were, but they could build something new, something grounded in honesty and authenticity. One evening, Emily received a call from her mother. It was a brief conversation, but it was enough. Emily, I've been thinking a lot. I know I've hurt you. I'm proud of you. I just want you to know that, even if I didn't always show it, her mother said. Emily didn't say much, but she smiled softly, knowing that this was a step toward healing, even if it wasn't perfect. It was progress. She had learned something important through it all. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant letting go of the past enough to create space for something better. And that was what Emily had done. She had created space for herself, for her own happiness, and she had stopped waiting for anyone to give her permission to live the life she deserved. As the days went by, Emily's life became more about the future than the past. Her business had reached new heights, but the most important achievement was the sense of peace she had found. She had learned to stand on her own, not just in her professional life, but in her personal life as well. She wasn't bound by the past anymore. She had freed herself from the chains of needing validation from others. She was enough on her own. The story of Emily's journey is one of self-discovery, strength, and resilience. It's a reminder that we often place too much of our worth in the hands of others, whether it's family, friends, or society. We wait for approval, for validation, for a sense of belonging. But the truth is, the only validation that truly matters comes from within. Emily's story is a testament to the power of embracing your own worth and standing firm in the face of adversity. It's a story of finding peace not by seeking approval from those who have hurt us, but by learning to love and accept ourselves. We all have the capacity to create the life we deserve, but it starts with believing that we are worthy of it. And sometimes, the most powerful step we can take is to simply let go of the past and trust that our future is ours to shape.